He came just to check on his grandmother, but what he found inside that quiet care home would change his life forever. A billionaire, a nurse, and a love story no one saw coming. Before we begin, tell us where in the world you're watching from. Comment your country or city below, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. Hit the bell so you never miss a twist. The sound of the city below was a constant hum in Nicholas Hale's penthouse, a dull roar that came through even the thickest windows. 48 floors above the chaos of downtown, his world was one of silence, sleek lines, and cold order. Every surface in his home gleamed. The polished marble floors, the glass walls, the brushed steel counters. A smart system adjusted the lighting based on the time of day. The temperature never fluctuated. The espresso machine hissed precisely at 6:45 a.m. His life was curated, timed, and flawlessly managed. Nicholas Hale was 35 years old and already one of the wealthiest private investors in the country. He owned stakes in everything from aerospace to organic pet food, and Forbes had labeled him the quiet architect of power, a feature he hadn't cared enough to read. On a late Tuesday morning, as he scanned through a spreadsheet of projections on a new logistics acquisition, his personal phone vibrated. Not his business phone. Only 5 people had his private number. He picked it up, expecting his lawyer or his housekeeper. "Mr. Hale," a woman's voice said gently, "this is Sandra from St. Augustine Residence Home. I'm calling about your grandmother, Margaret Hale." Nicholas froze. What happened? "Nothing critical," she assured quickly, "but she had a minor fall in the bathroom last night. No injuries, just a small bruise on her arm. She didn't want us to call you, but I thought you'd want to know. Why didn't anyone notify me last night?" She insisted she was fine and we monitored her overnight. Still, the staff physician recommended you come by when you're free. She's been asking for you. Nicholas leaned back, closing his eyes. The guilt rose fast and thick in his chest. "I'll come by this afternoon," he said. That would mean a lot to her. After hanging up, he sat for a moment in silence. His calendar was packed. Back-to-back meetings, calls with investors, a dinner with potential partners from Hong Kong, but none of it seemed to matter. He opened the drawer to his left and pulled out a small, faded photo. Him at 5 years old, sitting in a red wagon on the lawn of his grandmother's old house. She was crouched beside him, smiling, her silver hair pinned up like always. She was the only one left. His parents had died when he was 16, a tragic accident that catapulted him into both grief and unimaginable wealth. His grandmother had raised him until boarding school took over. He owed her more than he could ever repay, yet he hadn't seen her in 6 weeks. He canceled the rest of his day with one sentence to his assistant. "Family emergency, reschedule everything." An hour later, his matte black Maybach glided through the gates of St. Augustine Residence, a beautiful, modest care home tucked between a park and a church. The building itself was brick with white window frames, more comforting than luxurious. Birds chirped in the trees lining the gravel path to the front doors. The moment Nicholas stepped out of the car, he realized how alien this environment felt. He didn't belong here. Inside, the scent of lavender and antiseptic greeted him. The walls were decorated with cheerful paintings and framed photos of residents with visiting family members. At the reception desk, a kind-faced woman in her 50s looked up from a computer. "Mr. Hale?" she asked. He gave a small nod. "We weren't expecting you until later, but it's lovely to have you here. Is my grandmother in her room?" "She's in the garden, actually, with Zara. Would you like me to take you there? Who's Zara? The woman smiled. She's one of our best care assistants. Margaret adores her. Nicholas followed the woman through quiet, sunlit halls until they emerged into a small courtyard surrounded by flower beds and trees. There were benches nestled beneath shade, and a paved path wound through the grass like a lazy river. And there she was. Margaret Hale, now 86, sat in a wheelchair under a cherry blossom tree. Her frame was thinner than he remembered, her hair completely white, but her face still carried the sharp elegance he'd always admired. Next to her stood a young woman in blue scrubs, Zara, holding a thermos and laughing softly at something his grandmother had just said. Nicholas stopped short. Zara wasn't like the women he usually saw at events or on magazine covers. Her hair was tied into a loose bun of tight, dark curls. Her skin was warm brown, her features soft and open. She had the kind of smile that made people feel instantly at ease. And more than that, she was present. Not distracted or performative, just attentive. Do you remember what I said to that pastor, Zara? Margaret was saying. I believe your exact words were, I may be old, sir, but I'm not senile. I know when a man's trying to sell me a fundraiser dressed up as theology. They both burst into laughter. Nicholas smiled despite himself. Margaret spotted him and waved, her face lighting up. Nicholas, you came. He approached slowly, nodding once at Zara, who regarded him with calm, unreadable eyes. Grandma, he said, kneeling beside her, I heard about the fall. Are you okay? Bruised pride, that's all, she replied, squeezing his hand. Zara's been spoiling me worse than I deserve. Zara stepped back slightly. I'll give you two some time. You don't have to. I do. Mrs. M needs her grandson, she said gently, then added, Nice to meet you, Mr. Hale. She walked away without a second glance. Nicholas stared after her. It was the first time in years someone hadn't reacted to his name with awe or calculation. She hadn't even blinked. She's not impressed by your bank account, if that's what you're wondering, Margaret said dryly. He looked back at her. I noticed. She's been taking care of me since I moved in. Brings me my favorite tea, helps me with the audiobooks, and listens to my stories like they're Shakespeare. Nicholas sat on the bench beside her. She seems competent. Margaret gave him a look. She's more than competent. She's kind. They sat in silence for a moment. Birds chirped above. Somewhere, wind chimes rang. I'm sorry I haven't come more often, he said finally. Yes, Margaret agreed without judgment. You've been busy building empires. I should have made time. You're here now, she said simply, and that's what matters. They talked for nearly an hour about his work, her favorite new book, the other residents she had befriended. Every few minutes, Nicholas would catch sight of Zara in the distance, helping someone in a walker, adjusting sun hats, kneeling to speak at eye level to a woman in a wheelchair. When it was time to go, he wheeled his grandmother back to her room himself. At the door, she reached for his hand again. She's not your type, you know, she said. Who? Zara? I didn't say. I saw the way you looked at her, but she's not like the women you date, Nicholas. She's real. He didn't answer. On his way out, he passed the front desk where Zara was updating files. For reasons he couldn't explain, he stopped. Zara, he said. She looked up, expression neutral. I just wanted to say thank you for taking such good care of my grandmother. She's a wonderful woman, Zara replied. It's not hard to care for someone like her. Still, I appreciate it. Zara nodded and turned back to her screen. Dismissed. Nicholas left the building confused and oddly restless. That night, in his massive penthouse, as city lights stretched below him, he found himself unable to sleep. His mind kept drifting back to St. Augustine, to his grandmother's laugh, to Zara's calm eyes, to a world that didn't revolve around power or deals, but around presence and kindness. He didn't know why, but he wanted to go back, not out of guilt, out of something else entirely, something he didn't yet have the words for. Nicholas Hale didn't return to St. Augustine residence out of obligation. He came back the next day, and the day after that, each visit carving a dent into the armor he'd spent decades building. At first, he told himself it was for his grandmother. She was aging, fragile, and needed family support. But deep down, he knew there was another reason. Zara Brooks. Every day he saw her, she was doing something that didn't fit the world Nicholas came from, giving comfort without expectation, offering smiles that weren't part of a transaction, laughing with joy that didn't need to be earned. He arrived one Thursday afternoon carrying a bag of his grandmother's favorite lemon scones from a bakery in Midtown. The staff at the front desk no longer looked surprised when he entered. Some even nodded warmly, which still felt strange. Nicholas wasn't used to being recognized for anything other than his wealth. As he turned the corner toward Margaret's room, he nearly collided with Zara coming out of it. She wore the same navy blue scrubs, her curly hair wrapped in a patterned headband. She held a clipboard in one hand, a water bottle in the other. Her expression remained calm, professional, but there was a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. "You're back," she said. He straightened. "Thought I'd check in on Grandma, and I brought her something sweet to undo all the healthy food you've been forcing on her." Zara raised an eyebrow. "She likes my applesauce muffins. She told me she hides them under her napkin." That earned the faintest smile. "You don't have to keep coming, you know." Nicholas hesitated. "She likes having me here." Zara nodded. "That's true." But the way she said it made him wonder if she was really answering the question he'd asked, or the one he hadn't. Inside, Margaret was beaming. They shared the scones over tea. Nicholas helped her adjust the throw blanket on her knees and listened to her stories, most of which he already knew. But he didn't mind. Her voice calmed him in ways nothing else did. Later, while walking back through the hall, he passed a small activity room where a volunteer was reading to residents. He paused at the window. Zara sat on the floor, legs folded, surrounded by 3 elderly women. One leaned on her shoulder. Another rested a hand on her arm. Zara was completely present, nodding along to the story with an almost childlike attentiveness. Nicholas stood there longer than he meant to, watching the scene. No pretense, no ego, just care. That night, he lay awake in bed again. His sleek apartment suddenly felt cold, sterile. The designer furniture, the panoramic view, the curated art, it was all noise. He thought of Zara's smile, the crinkle at the edge of her eyes when something genuinely amused her, and how, in her presence, his titles meant nothing. And it bothered him in a way that didn't feel bad at all. The next week, he came prepared. "Volunteering?" Zara repeated when she saw him carrying 2 cardboard boxes of puzzles and books into the activities room. He shrugged, setting them down on the table. "Thought I'd pitch in." She narrowed her eyes. "In Armani shoes?" "They're Ferragamo, but I brought sneakers in the car." Zara stared for a moment, then let out a breath of amused disbelief. "Fine. You can help me set up for the art workshop." Margaret, who had been watching the interaction from the hallway, chuckled to herself. "Don't let her boss you around too much," she called. "She already does," Nicholas muttered. Over the next hour, he helped Zara prepare the tables, unwrap watercolor sets, and pass out paper. It was clumsy work at first. He spilled a jar of brushes, dripped water on a sketch pad, but he didn't care. He was beginning to feel something unfamiliar in his chest. Satisfaction. Purpose. As the residents filtered in, Zara introduced him to each one like a proud assistant manager showing off her trainee. "This is Mr. Hale," she said. "He's not an artist, but he's learning." Nicholas took it with grace, smiling awkwardly, letting go of the need to perform. At one point, while helping a woman named Doris mix pink paint, Zara leaned in and whispered, "Not bad for a billionaire." Nicholas turned to her. That was a compliment, right? She smirked and walked away. He didn't know why her teasing warmed him so much, but it did. More than the compliments he got from shareholders, more than the admiration he received at industry galas. Zara saw through him and still smiled. That evening, they crossed paths in the parking lot. "You have any paint on you?" she asked, eyeing his black button-down shirt. "Probably on my soul," he replied. She chuckled. "I'll take that as progress." He paused before getting into his car. "Can I ask you something?" Zara raised a brow. "Sure." "Would you ever," he faltered, "would you ever want to get coffee sometime outside of here?" Her face changed subtly. Not rejection, but hesitation. "I appreciate the offer, Nicholas," she said gently, "but this is complicated." "Why?" She sighed. "Because you live in a world that's very different from mine. And in my experience, when those worlds collide, someone always ends up hurt. I'm not like the men you think I am." "Maybe," she said, "but I don't have the luxury of guessing wrong." He didn't press, but her words stayed with him. Later that night, Nicholas had dinner with old friends, tech investors and real estate moguls. They drank vintage wine, swapped jokes, and bragged about vacation homes. When one asked about his frequent disappearances, Nicholas told them he'd been visiting his grandmother. They nodded politely, then moved on. But he couldn't. His world suddenly felt artificial, empty. A few days later, Margaret brought it up. "Zara likes you, you know," she said, sipping tea. Nicholas looked up from fluffing her pillow. "She doesn't act like it. She's cautious. Her father was a janitor. Her mother cleaned houses. That girl's worked for everything she has. You come from penthouses and private jets. I'm not trying to impress her with any of that." "Good," Margaret said, nodding, "because it won't work." She studied him for a moment. "Have you ever done something just because it made someone else feel seen?" "I fund charities." "That's not what I asked." Nicholas was silent. His grandmother smiled knowingly. "If you want to reach her, Nicholas, you'll have to get your hands dirty, literally and metaphorically." He took those words to heart. That Saturday, Nicholas showed up at a local community garden Zara had mentioned in passing. He wore jeans, an old t-shirt, and his least expensive shoes. He helped haul compost, plant seedlings, and turn soil. His hands ached. His knees were covered in dirt, but when Zara arrived, the look on her face was something he would never forget. "You actually came," she said, incredulous. "You said you needed volunteers. I didn't think you'd show up in person." "I wanted to help." Zara crossed her arms. "No assistants, no reporters, just you." He nodded. She studied him for a long moment. "All right then," she said, handing him a shovel. "Let's see what you've got." They worked side by side for hours. He helped children plant tomatoes. She taught him how to set up a trellis, and at one point their hands brushed while reaching for the same hose. It was such a small moment, but it felt seismic. That afternoon, while sitting on a wooden bench beneath an old elm tree, Nicholas finally asked, "Why do you do all this? The garden? The residence? The long hours?" Zara looked up at the sky. "Because it matters," she said, "because no one else will." Nicholas nodded slowly. "You know what I thought when I first saw you? That I was just another employee in scrubs?" "No," he said. "I thought you were the most grounded person I'd ever met." Zara turned to him, her expression softer now. "Thank you," she said. A pause, then she added, "Coffee might not be the worst idea, as long as it's someplace that doesn't serve gold-dusted pastries." Nicholas laughed. "I think I can manage that." Nicholas Hale stood in front of his closet, staring at a row of designer suits, wondering if any of them said community fundraiser instead of global acquisition. A week ago, he would have picked the most expensive one without a second thought. Now he hesitated. On the coffee table in the living room lay a handwritten invitation Zara had given him, an event at St. Augustine called Evening of Memories for residents and their families. It was simple, homey. A few local musicians, some shared stories, photo displays, and food prepared by volunteers. Nicholas had immediately offered to fund it entirely, but Zara had only smiled and said, "We've got it covered, but if you want to come, we'd love to see you there." He'd seen that smile before, the one that both welcomed him and reminded him that money wasn't a substitute for presence. He chose a simple black sweater and dark slacks, no tie, no watch, no branding, no armor. When he arrived at the care home that evening, the parking lot was full. People were arriving with flowers, baked goods, framed photos. Inside, the common room had been transformed. String lights hung from the ceiling and soft jazz played from a speaker. Tables were set with handmade centerpieces. On one wall, a collage of photos showed residents as young adults, children, parents. Nicholas found his grandmother sitting near the front, wearing her favorite green scarf. "Darling," she said, reaching for his hand, "you made it." "Wouldn't miss it." She beamed. "Zara's been organizing everything. This place would fall apart without her." He scanned the room. Zara stood by the snack table, helping a resident with a cup of punch. Her hair was down for once, loose curls cascading over her shoulders. She wore a navy blue dress, modest but elegant. When she turned and saw him, her face brightened. "You clean up well," she said when he approached. "So do you," he replied, unable to keep the admiration from his voice. They stood side by side watching residents and family members mingle. Zara waved at a boy chasing a balloon, then turned to Nicholas. "Thanks for coming." "Thanks for letting me." Their eyes met. She didn't look away. "I had a lot of doubts at first," Zara admitted. "About you. About this." "I know," Nicholas said, "and I don't blame you." She studied his face. "But you've surprised me. I've surprised myself." They laughed softly, a shared moment of understanding passing between them. The event unfolded gently. Stories were shared, funny, moving, ordinary, and unforgettable. One woman spoke about meeting her husband at a train station during the war. A man talked about losing his dog and finding it waiting for him at home 3 days later. Margaret spoke last. "I've lived a long life," she said from her chair, "and the best parts were never the money or the vacations or the milestones. They were the moments. The small ones, the people, the laughter in the kitchen, the Sunday walks, the hands I held." She looked at Nicholas and smiled. "I think my grandson's learning that now, too." People clapped softly. Nicholas swallowed past the lump in his throat. Later, as the room cleared and volunteers began tidying up, Zara handed Nicholas a box of leftover cookies. You earned these, she said. Hardest I've ever worked for oatmeal raisin, he replied. Zara chuckled, then grew quiet. Nick. The nickname caught him off guard in the best way. I like being with you, she said carefully. I like how I feel when you're around. But I still worry. About what? About becoming some story. About being the girl the millionaire dated to prove he had depth. He reached for her hands. You're not a story. You're the reason I'm finally writing a new one. She blinked, caught between emotion and disbelief. I know we come from different worlds, he continued, but I don't want mine if it doesn't include you, and I don't want to take you out of yours. I want to build something new, together. Zara looked down at their joined hands. You mean that? With everything I have. 2 weeks passed. They began spending more time together outside the care home. Walks in the park, grocery shopping, a visit to an art gallery where Nicholas pretended to understand abstract sculpture until Zara called him out, laughing. He took her to a diner she used to visit with her mother. She took him to a community potluck where no one knew his last name, and it was the most relaxed he'd been in years. But not everything was easy. At Harrington and Hale Holdings, pressure was mounting. Where the hell have you been? Asked Marcus, his longtime CFO, cornering him in a glass hallway. Nicholas didn't stop walking. Spending time with my grandmother. You've missed 3 strategy sessions, Nicholas. You're dodging press interviews. People are talking. Let them. They're saying you're distracted. Maybe I am, Nicholas replied. And maybe that's not a bad thing. Marcus stared at him. Is this about that girl? The one from the care home? Nicholas stopped walking. You want to be very careful with what you say next, he said, voice quiet but lethal. Marcus backed off. I'm just saying, we all have roles to play. People are watching you. Then let them watch me change. He walked away, heart pounding. That weekend, Zara came by his apartment for the first time. Wow, she said softly, stepping inside. It's like a museum. Nicholas chuckled. Yeah, I keep trying to figure out what it's supposed to say about me. That you're successful, that you value control, that you don't spill anything. He laughed. Guilty. Zara walked slowly through the space, running her fingers along the edge of a shelf. It's beautiful, she said, but it doesn't feel like anyone lives here. He looked around and realized she was right. Then help me change that, he said. They cooked dinner together that night, or rather she cooked and he tried not to burn the garlic. They danced in the kitchen to old Motown songs. They shared stories, painful, hilarious, honest. And when she kissed him goodnight, he realized it was the first time in years he wasn't pretending to be anyone else. The next day, Nicholas did something no one expected. He scheduled a meeting with the board, and he told them he was stepping back from expansion into Singapore. We've grown fast, he said, but we've lost our values. We need to reinvest locally, ethically, sustainably. The room went silent, then chaos. Are you insane? Marcus shouted. We're in the middle of a global strategy. I'm aware, Nicholas said, but I'm also aware that my company doesn't reflect the man I want to be anymore. He handed out new proposal packets, green initiatives, local investments, a partnership with senior care networks, a foundation in his grandmother's name. You're throwing away profit, someone scoffed. I'm trading short-term wealth for long-term worth, Nicholas said calmly. If that's a deal-breaker, you're welcome to resign. No one did, but the air shifted. He left the meeting with a clarity he hadn't felt in years. A few nights later, he brought Zara back to St. Augustine under a pretense. "We need to drop something off," he said vaguely. She followed him into the garden behind the building. There, nestled in the corner, was a brand-new wooden gazebo. A plaque read, "For the quiet moments that matter." Zara stared at it, speechless. "I had it built for the residents," Nicholas said, "and for you." Tears filled her eyes. "Nick," he dropped to one knee. Zara gasped, "Will you marry me?" She covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I don't have a ring tonight," he added, "because I want us to pick it together. But I have this." He pulled a tiny sprig of rosemary from his pocket. "For remembrance," he said, smiling nervously. "It's what you planted in the garden last week." Zara laughed through her tears. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Nicholas stood, and she threw her arms around him. Behind them, inside the building, Margaret stood at the window, watching. "I told him," she said to no one in particular, her voice full of satisfaction. "Real wealth, at last." If this story touched you, make sure to subscribe for more emotional and inspiring stories. We post new videos every week. And before you go, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? We'd love to hear from you.